This is Agronomy Moment. I'm Wendell Cohen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back here with another podcast wrapping up 23, really. We kind of did something a few weeks ago, Celena, with respect to how did 23 go. We talked a lot about corn, we had a lot more information, and then we briefly got to talking about soybeans, but we hadn't taken out some of the plot data, and so we showed you some of the pods and how the stems were, and I'm going to throw in here, right here, a little bit of what we see.
So I thought it'd be worth popping this picture of all the pods together for comparison's sake, because after we shot the video, we pulled the pods off the plants, lined them up in columns, and counted them. Originally, I was putting it on the May 28 as the lead in production. Now I'm not so sure. Might still win. I don't know. We'll see what happens if we can get this harvested in a fair and square way. And then on the June 26th, obviously we see a significant reduction as we start getting late in the year.
So anyway,
with that, like Wendell said, we had a lot to do with the pods and counting them and the things we said then. And then, now we have harvest data. So a very large chunk of that was corn, and a brief look at, hey, here's what we're doing in our soybean studies, our soybean study out there, which related to the population and planting date. So now we have the harvest data, so we're going to dive in a little bit to the harvest data and what we saw from what the combine said, and no matter how you cut it, might be a little bit of what we expected in some cases, and maybe a little bit unexpected in some other cases.
Yep. So what we did out here is, like we said, early, mid, late two populations, low and high. Mm-hmm. And Celena, would you kind of walk us through? I don't know if we want to get wrapped up in the weeds and pull up this sheet so you could study it. You guys can study it on your own time. But I think what we mainly want to do is underscore some of our takeaways and what we observed.
Yeah. So I think one of the main takeaways here is that. We're looking at the data and we see the early planting compared to the later planting. We normally say get your beans in early, and the combine might have said something a little bit different there. However, if we throw it back to April timeframe, which I don't really want to throw it back to there because it's things I'd rather just forget, but we had really cold, or I should say really cold, but cooler than normal and dry conditions
in April.
So when we're going through, we're planting this. Our beans on April 6th, no matter planted low or planted high, they were suffering a little bit to get out of the ground as far as that germination. So key takeaway from that one for me is so long we have a sufficient population out there, our early planting date is still better, or early on time better than our late planting date.
Yep. And so and I think the other takeaway we can take is due to the cold and dry weather, in areas like at that 78,000, we did not get sufficient populations because I think there's 30,000 final. It wasn't enough. We had big gaps, struggled with weed pressures, and but where we had the higher pops, which was like 234,000, even though that's not a recommended population for that date by any means, we ended up with somewhere around that 100 and some thousand, low hundreds. Therefore, that's kind of our takeaway in here, is that with sufficient populations, we still see yields trending higher in this plot than we did in that late May, early June. And then we seen the late June turn around and do something surprising where it really came in good.
Yeah, on that late June, I thought it was just looking at the combine data, really kind of contradicting in a way the lower population. And just taking into consideration our weather conditions this year, why that lower population, I think, by and large, was significantly better than, it was better in our lower pops than the higher pops, and typically we're going to have higher pops during that time. It's a double crop. We have to have more nodes out there, have to get more plants out there. But this year, when we couldn't buy rain, there were less plants out there competing for what little moisture there was.
Yes.
And like you said, we kind of caught the end of the early but beginning of the late rains. And so I
Yes.
think that played a large part in it too, that Mother Nature always throws us a curveball.
Yeah. So we wanted to just roll that back in here for as a takeaway and tell you how that ended up. Also, I'll put up a picture here to show you a field I took a picture of when I was combining, and I wish so badly I'd thrown the hoop out here because it was a perfect example of what we're talking about: low pops, mid pops, and higher. And the takeaway there that I come up with is I watched the yield monitors. Would go through the thin spots, and obviously the monitor would go down when you get down to below about 40, 50,000. You also notice that there's some weeds. So we had weed pressure also compounding it. What I did also notice is we sort of yield plateaued when we started getting above 60,000 all the way up to that 100 and 110,000. In the picture on the far left, you can see it was probably around 100,000. On the far right, you can see areas that are probably that 60 to 80. We didn't see such a yield difference. In that same field, though, where I come in and just stitched them in with some thin areas and ended up getting a little too thick, our yield went back down again. Was that because of a hot, dry year and it put a lot of pressure on those plants? Could have been part of it. Could have been some of the compaction of going in with the planter and tractor again. But takeaway again was we need to make decisions. Good decision-making process is following: do we have enough to canopy and control our weeds? Because that's a really good level also as it relates to trying to maximize our yield and profit return.
Yeah, not forgetting that our original plant stand that we have there is carrying the bulk of our our yield there, and what you did spot in wasn't helping a ton. But back to our underlying kind of why we are spotting in is because, like we see in the picture, our weed pressure. Ultimately, that's one of the biggest contributing factors to deciding whether to go in there and stitch in some beans or not, is because our weeds just become uncontrollable at that point with that big of a gap.
Yes, yep, agreed. So just a little closure here on 23 as it relates to our soybeans, keeping you in the loop with what we have going on. Hey, thank you for watching, being with us.
Hold on, also,
Oh, yeah. When
it's fall. It's winter time,
Oh,
a really
yes.
good time.
I forgot.
If you haven't done your soil sample or don't have a current soil sample on your field, now's a really good time to go ahead and get that done. A soil sample is a really good foundation of where our soil is at and where we need to be going with that soil, how we can improve our soil structure and fertilization. Lime this time of year is really good to consider if need be, and then also a really good time to maybe consider putting some P&K on this fall and winter.
Thanks for injecting that into here before we shut her down, because I agree that's a good point. And if you have any questions regarding your soil samples or have questions on what you should be doing, feel free to reach out. We try to give you our humble opinions as well as those of the universities and others who help us. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and hopefully we'll be coming up with some more topics and information for you soon as we go through our winter months. See ya.
See ya.
If you want alerts on what we are finding in the field, go to topagservices.com/signups to receive alert, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is our goal to bring you the most recent and advanced information possible. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We also ask you that you give us a like and follow our channel wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch these videos. This ultimately helps us reach more people like you.
Hello?
Hey, this has been Wendell Cohen, your show host. Thank you to all who made this show possible. This show is over. See ya.